There's the perception of a dark cloud over our industry, and it's not one thing. In general, the value of content has decreased, but the cost to create it has increased. And I don't know any other industry like that, where the manufacturing costs $1, but the worth is 50 cents. How known is this cast internationally? That is the #1 most important element to a film today. Unlike the studios, who can spend their way into the consciousness of a consumer, we can't. My name is Clay Epstein. I'm president of Film Mode Entertainment, and we are a worldwide sales agent that also does some executive producing, which we can explain what that is as well. And we're also starting U.S. distribution. So we've released one film this year, and we're going to be releasing a next film in May or June of 2018. And eventually we would like to do a film a month in the U.S. I had a dream, and I went to film school. I did kind of a pretty standard, almost old school trajectory, if you will, because a lot of the new kids we're seeing coming into the industry have gone a bit of a different path. But I wanted to be a filmmaker, an actor, went to film school, and it ended up nowhere, really. You know, I didn't have the talent, I didn't have the patience, and I'd gotten a job right out of film school when I graduated with the independent distribution company. I was answering phones and working for some very interesting, very animated people. So I call that my grad school, and it was a great experience to see how things really were working. I got to meet some great filmmakers. So, and I was a runner, I was answering phones, a PA, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. But at the time, it was a pretty big distribution company. 70 to 100 employees, everyone had an assistant, it was a big office in Brentwood. So it was a great environment for me to kind of see what the world was like in entertainment. And I learned soon after that my talents may lie elsewhere than behind or in front of the camera. I made a really bad short film, I made a bad feature, I acted in a bad short film of someone else's. I tried to do some industrial video work that was bad. Everything I was touching production and creatively was pretty bad. But it was good to have that experience and find out and learn that that might not be where I was going to end up or might not be the best fit for me. And my day job started to flourish. I got promoted from answering phones to becoming an assistant in marketing. And all of a sudden that opened up another door of networking, of understanding how independent films were marketed. I was writing the little log lines on the back of the flyers. And that day you'd have a flyer for each indie film. Now we kind of have brochures and a lot more digital marketing. But at that time, every film had a flyer. You can imagine thousands and thousands and thousands of flyers in the storeroom of a film. And that company had regular narrative features, they had family films, and they had soft erotic films. And so my job for the first month of marketing assistant was to write the log lines of these soft erotic films, which are essentially all the same, right? There's only so many plots. And I had to come up with a way that each log line and synopsis was a little bit different from the previous one. So I remember coming up with a list of words, kind of erotic sounding words that were not too forthcoming. And I had this list in front of me at my desk, and I said to myself, okay, I could use 3 or 4 per log line, but I can't repeat them. So they don't keep coming up. And that was my first real marketing task. And I kind of liked that world. I liked the challenge. It combined some interest that I had in marketing, so it did give me some creative outlet. And I started to learn marketing in the sense of we're marketing to a distributor, a buyer, that's business to business, as well as marketing to a consumer. And that led to international sales. I had the international president at the time of this company, the head of the sales department, come to me, and he says, look, the guy you're working for is a doofus. He's going to be fired next week. Why don't you come work for me? My assistant left. I think you'd be a good fit. You've done a bit of travel. I had studied in Italy for a year, so I had at least some awareness that LA was not the only, place in the world. And I took him up on it. I was a little hesitant, thinking, am I going to be giving up my ambition to be a filmmaker? But I did it, and it was the best decision I did. I'm still in touch with that gentleman. He's been a mentor to me through the years. still a friend. And it was really him that gave me the idea of international sales and distribution. Certainly at that time, and maybe even now, but certainly at that time, film schools didn't teach anything about distribution or sales. Certainly nothing about foreign distribution or sales. And I don't think the professors really knew much about it, otherwise they would have been talking about it. There's the perception of a dark cloud over our industry, and it's not one thing. It's not just the sexual harassment cases that are coming out every day in Variety. It's not just piracy. It's a combination. I think the top 3 or 4 areas that have affected our industry negatively, and then I'll get more positive because I don't want to be a negative person. I have to be very optimistic. That's why we're in this business. But the top 3 or 4 challenges we've had over the last 10 to 15 years that have really affected our business in a negative way would be piracy. It used to be a couple of guys selling fake DVDs or VHS tapes on the street. It affected our business, but it was somewhat manageable. But with online piracy, you can imagine how that skyrocketed very quickly and affected our business so negatively. And it's difficult from the perception of a consumer because they're thinking, oh, poor Tom Cruise, he's only going to make 20 million on this film instead of 40 million. That's not going to affect his private jet. And so much of the profile of our industry is celebrity, wealth, materialistic objects, and that's what the consumer sees. What they don't see is me in a meeting at the Lowe's in AFM or the Palais in Cannes or the Marriott in Berlin, and having a distributor come to me and say, you know what, I would have bought this for 50 grand, but I'm not going to buy it at all because it's pirated. And that 50,000 would have gone back to the investor of an independent film because he invested his own money or he mortgaged his house or he took a loan out on the bank. And if you multiply that by all the different territories and all the films, this is not affecting the celebrities' bottom line. This is affecting independent filmmakers that truly are not making huge profits. They're making enough, hopefully, to make another film. They haven't won the lottery. They want to be career filmmakers. That's who it's affecting. It's the crew. If they can't make another film, they can't hire the crew. The guy that is hired to move the lights or to drive the truck or to craft services, they're not wealthy individuals with private jets. They truly are surviving on film to film for their career, for their well-being. That's who it's affecting. And the consumer doesn't see that. They're not educated about it. I'm not going to have an opinion on whether or not they want to be, but they're not. They don't have that realistic information, that true, authentic perception of what piracy is really doing. So I would put that at the top of what's affecting us negatively. Another area that's affecting our business negatively, and it's a big obstacle for us, is the increase in local production. And that is because of the increase in the affordability of equipment, the accessibility of equipment. And I'm of two minds. I think it's wonderful that we're hearing new voices, we're seeing new films, filmmakers that would not have had a chance possibly in countries all over the world. Turkey has a fantastic industry. There's films coming out of Greece. Germany always had an industry. France always had an industry. UK always had an industry. Italy always had an industry. Countries in Asia, Mongolia is making films. Vietnam's making films. So if you put yourself in the shoes of an audience in one of these foreign language countries, and they've always been seeing Americans and having to read subtitles or dubbed, and all of a sudden it's an actor they're familiar with in their own home language, shot in their city. That's exciting, and I get that, and I encourage it in one side, but it affects our capability and the demand for that English language film to be exported. So that has affected us as well. On the flip side, the access to equipment you would think has brought budgets down, and in some ways it has, and in some ways it hasn't. So those are two big areas, certainly. The other area, obviously, is the monopolization of media. And that is probably up there, with the issue of piracy. There are platforms, SVOD platforms, subscription VOD. That's what Netflix is considered is a subscription VOD platform. And so one of the other areas which is an obstacle for us, and again, both an obstacle and a positive depending on where you sit on that end of the deal, is the monopolization of media. That is, for an example, that might be TV networks being owned or owning studios. That might be an exhibition company like a movie theater chain being owned by a studio or a media house. That might be a subscription service or a network. Netflix is referred to as SVOD. It's subscription VOD. Amazon Prime is subscription VOD. They're creating a lot of their own content. You know, if you've read the trades, Netflix is spending billions on their own content. And so if they're creating their own content, I'm not able to sell them my content. But if they were to come in with my content early and say, we want to finance your content, that's a positive. And so it's a gray area. You really can't say the monopolization or the increase of Netflix and Amazon or Apple now is going to become a content creator and a platform of media as well. You can't say blanketly that is negative, but it's affected us, right? And in some days that effect is negative, and in some days that effect is positive. In general, the value of content has decreased, but the cost to create it has increased. And I don't know any other industry like that, where the manufacturing costs $1, but the worth is 50 cents. That is 9 out of 10 films, unfortunately. That's the harsh reality no one wants to talk about. That 10th film cost $1 and is worth 50. Everyone is reaching for that. And because it's an industry of dreams and a creative industry, and the type of personalities and the mindset you need to get into this industry, we are all chasing that win. And it's amazing what people will go through and endure. Some of the positive elements are the same as the negatives, like the monopolization, like companies that have been developed over the last few years, like in Netflix. Apple is now going to be creating their own content for content creators, for filmmakers, for the writers that Apple's going to help finance. That's a great day for them. For us, it might be challenging because that might not be an opportunity for us to sell our existing content to them. But on a good day, they may come to us for projects to do together. So we have to learn new ways to partner with companies. The model used to be very simple. The model used to be an independent producer raised money, made the film, came to us, we sold it for more than they made it for. And when I say sell, I mean license the film to countries and distributors within that country throughout the world. And collectively, all of those license fees added up to more than the film cost. That's completely changed now. That happens sometimes, but it can be a combination of things. You may have Netflix acquire some territories. You may have a studio acquire some territories. You may do it the traditional model where you're breaking them out bit by bit. But many territories go unsold. And then that stems from what the demand is in that territory, what those parameters are in that territory. There's been more and more an issue of the least amount of effort for the most return. And so if you've read the trades over the last few years, even with studios, the trend throughout media and maybe either other industries is you put all your resources and effort into something big because the payoff can be so much greater, rather than spinning your wheels with a lot of small for very modest payback and modest return. And that is absolutely true in our business, with distribution, with studios, with financing, etc. We receive projects and films from all over. Obviously, the people we're doing deals with to get those films, the type of person that we are acquiring the film from, and then we do the licensing and distribution deals for them on their behalf. Those would be producers. The producers that have that own the IP, that control the rights to the film. And these producers come from existing relationships. They may be introduced to us through mutual attorneys, mutual lending entities, friends. I get calls and emails from, I get a message on a Facebook, my friend said he knew you and I have a film, would you be interested in taking a look? I need representation. And I've always kept that in mind. You never know where the next film is going to come from. That truly is an honest statement to make. So networking, we know networking is important in our industry. But to say, well, what type of networking or how you network, you never know where the next film's coming from, right? So I make sure I let entertainment attorneys, lenders, production people, everyone that's within our industry in some capacity know about us. My own network of acquaintances within the industry, rather they're close friends or colleagues or people I'd actually gone to school with, they know what I do. I grew up here. Again, I went to film school here. I've gotten calls and emails from Sound Mixer, who I've known for 20 years, that says, hey Clay, I was mixing this great film. You should take a look. I'm going to loop you in with the producer, right? That's great. You never know, right? Most of the time, it's a producer we know or someone who's been introduced to us through a mutual acquaintance. So we are looking for films that have bits and pieces of those commercial elements. It might be a thriller with a familiar face that's got a great title, or we will retitle the film so it has a great title. We will make a great trailer. We will make a great poster. So we can present it to a potential distributor and say, look how easy this is to release in your country. You don't have to think about how to market this film. We've done that for you. So the amount of time and effort I spend on a trailer, a poster, and a title is incredible. And also why you will commonly see a film with the great trailer, but the actual film is not as good as the trailer. But you need, this, again, it's marketing, it's packaging, right? And we're working with filmmakers that may not have the means, both financially or the experience, or a crew with the experience. It's difficult to make a film, whether it's bad or good or somewhere in the middle. It's not easy to make a film. And it's so subjective, everyone has their own ideas. Gets to us, if it's finished, it gets to us, we can't change it, so we try and shape it the best we can into something that we feel is going to work in the market. Now, when we get projects early, it's a script or an idea. If it's an idea, it needs to be with a very established filmmaker. If it's a script, it needs to be with an established filmmaker, because we aren't physically producing. So if someone sends us a script, it's from a producer that we know. He may have some financing, he may have a director. Hopefully he has a director and an actor, a known actor on board. And we can help bring the other pieces. So some of the other pieces would be, how could you help us finish the financing? And one of the big ways we could be helpful is that the buzzword everyone hears about is pre-sales, which is really selling a film before it's made. The way a developer of a housing community might sell a plot, and they're telling the potential buyer, there will be a supermarket, there will be a playground, and there will be a school. Trust us. Trust us. I know you see just dirt right now, but give us your money, and in 18 months you're going to have a house. Who would you believe? If it was a first-time architect and a first-time developer, I would not give them my money. But if it was a developer and an architect who had done this numerous times before, and they could show you, and you had something to compare it to, they said, well, we built this community 15 miles away, and there's the supermarket we promised, and the school, and the playground, and all the homes, and everyone's living there. It's everything we said it was going to be. So you can trust us, we're going to do it again. That's the way a potential distributor approaches a pre-sale. So you have to also put yourself in their shoes again. Why do they need this film? Why should they pre-buy it? Why should they commit to something that they're not going to get in 18 months? So they have to have a level of confidence. So it's risk mitigation. So as a salesperson, when I'm trying to convince a potential buyer to pre-buy a project, it's us trying to reduce their risk. When we're evaluating a project for pre-sales, we're evaluating it to be, how pre-sellable is this? How is this going to be perceived in the eyes of a potential distributor? And we want to reduce that risk for them, the perception of risk for them. So it's coming to us first. We have to have a perception of risk reduction so we can pass that perception on. So again, who's the director? Who's the producer? How commercial is the script? How well written is the script? Who's in it? When's it going to be ready? All of those elements. Is this a franchise? Is it derivative material? Is it original story? So the more intrinsic value you could bring to a project, the likelier your chances are of pre-selling it. The budget range of a pre-sellable title is going to be on the higher end, because really, as the home entertainment market decreases, the need for DVD is almost gone. In almost every country, DVD is almost disappeared outside of very specific titles, studio titles, and perhaps some branded content. And therefore, no one's really chasing movies to pre-buy for the home entertainment market. They're chasing films to pre-buy for the theatrical market or for the SVOD market. So Netflix is pre-buying in a sense, same as Amazon, as almost a co-producer. When we go to independent distributors, the ones that are really looking to pre-buy films are more theatrically driven distributors, right? And so that would be on the higher budget. That's kind of the 6 to 7 to 8 on a million. If it's the $1 million horror film, there are so many $1 million horror films in the marketplace that what would their reason be to pre-buy one that they're not going to get in the 12 to 18 months? And that is a long time in our business. So even if they do an evaluation of the value of that film now, it will decrease in 12 or 18 months, or it could decrease. So right there is a risk. If you have a fantastic director who's award-winning and a very accomplished producer and a phenomenally written script and a great A-list actor or actress, and it's derivative work, it's based on a book that has a built-in audience, you are now handing them a package with intrinsic value. And that's how they base their evaluation on it, is that intrinsic value. The other element, of course, is the competitive nature of it. The moment you have two companies wanting the same project, you have opportunity now, right? So the process we go through to evaluate whether it's a film or project we should get involved in is driven by two things. One, really weighing the decision more. Is there an audience for it? And when I say that, is there a distributor around the world that thinks there's an audience for it? So we have to convince distributors, who we call our clients, that there's an audience in their country for it. And in many times that's difficult because the filmmaker and we may know there is an audience, but there's always that threshold of how big the audience is and how difficult it's going to be to get to them. So I go back to least amount of effort for the greatest return. If the distributor thinks there's going to be a lot of work to get to the consumer/audience, they're going to hesitate. If they have a tough time imagining how the film's going to be marketed, what's the genre, what's the poster going to look like, what's the trailer going to look like, and what film within the last 6 to 12 months is this most similar to that was successful? And if those answers aren't positive, the distributor's going to hesitate. So we try and put ourselves into the shoes of our clients the best we can. We evaluate projects in several different ways, but most specifically what we're looking for is if there's an audience for the film. And taking that one step further, do our distributors think and are convinced there's an audience for the film? And how much effort do they have to put in to reach that audience? Now, there are some specific elements that we are looking for when we see a film. The cast, most important. Who's in the film? How known is this cast internationally? That is the number one most important element to a film today. As the business gets more difficult, more selective, more challenging, more competitive, the one question you get asked from everyone, who's in it? And that is because, unlike the studios, who can spend their way into the consciousness of a consumer, we can't. And so it's not uncommon that a studio spends $200 million on a movie and casts the lead as a relatively unknown actor. The Force Awakens, who knew John Boyega yet, right? Not really. The world really didn't know him or the actress that plays Rey, right? But the brand and that director And that movie and how much money they spent on P&A doesn't matter. They were making stars. They're in the business of making stars. In the independent space, we're the opposite. We have to kind of take advantage of the stars that have been made, which is why you'll see a Bruce Willis movie on VOD that you've never heard of, and Bruce is in it for 5 minutes. Same with Stallone, same with Jason Statham, and etc. A lot of actors that were A-list movie stars in the 90s are showing up in independent films today, because you don't have to spend money on a huge amount of marketing to the consumer to educate them on what this is. It's a Bruce Willis action film. Look at that poster. It's at least worth you clicking on, right? That's why there's intrinsic value in those films. And I always kind of refer to this virtual guide of commerciality, right? On one side of the spectrum, the most commercial independent film is an action film with a major A-list star from the 90s. And The Expendables defined that, because it was an action film with every A-list star from the 80s and 90s, right? That's why they made it. That's exactly why they did it. They said to themselves, if we had the perfect film for the independent marketplace, what would it be? An action film with Stallone. And then they said, well, what if it's an action film with Stallone and Schwarzenegger? And, you know. So The Expendables is a great litmus test for like the best type of film to sell in the independent space. And we know from experience the film did well and the sequels did well, etc. The further you get from that side of the spectrum, your value decreases, your chances of distribution decreases, the capability to get the film financed decreases, etc. So on the other side of the spectrum, I would say it's a black and white drama in a language other than English. That's the other side of the spectrum. Now, someone watching this or in the classroom or an audience somewhere in the world may say, I love those films. That's what I'm seeking out, and I can't find them. And if I can't find them, there must be other audiences that want to see them. Shouldn't there be an opportunity for them? No, there isn't. Because it needs not just be made well, it needs to win the Oscar. Not just be made well, it needs to win the Oscar to have any chance of awareness or distribution. So that's really two sides of the spectrum, right? Modern day action film with A-list stars, English language, fun, very accessible. It can play on every TV channel, every airline, every movie theater, every language, every audience. It transcends all of that. So regarding co-productions and financing independent films, and even larger studio films are largely being financed by co-productions, incentives, subsidies. We call that soft money. Anytime you're going to get money from a government or a grant or a tax rebate, all these buzzwords that you may be hearing lately, that's called soft money. That's what we refer to it as soft money. Unfortunately, for an American filmmaker who only has an American passport, they are at a disadvantage today. No matter how talented they are unfortunately at a disadvantage. That's something that bothers me. There's not a social endeavor or social efforts in America to invest and encourage the creativity in our entertainment industry, or to invest in new filmmakers and in new talent. That is because you think of the movie business kind of starting here largely, that the studios are here, that there's so much money here already. It would be difficult to get society wrapped around the idea, again, because of the perception. Why should we have to be giving money to these wealthy celebrities? And it's not that, of course. However, in other countries, specifically Canada, UK, Australia is a big one that supports the arts. They are investing in a very organized way to encourage and create new talent in their country. So they're investing an enormous amount of funds into this, which means if you are a new filmmaker, an existing filmmaker, a budding filmmaker, you have opportunity to apply for these funds, to write scripts, to shoot films, shorts, features, to promote them, to get talent. And if you stop to think for a moment, a lot of our new movie stars are Australian. If you look at the passports, not just the Hemsworths and the Edgertons, there are others. That's not a coincidence. It's because Australia has invested in their talent pool, and they have risen to a point where they are getting awareness, and then they come to LA to pop into the studio films. But the opportunities arose out of that organized mentality that we will invest in our talent pool. Same with Canada. There's a lot of Canadian movie stars because of this. So that takes us to co-productions. How do you make a film in Canada? How can I make a film in Australia? Well, you can and you can't. There's no co-production treaty with America. There's no official co-production treaty with America. The only soft money we have are some tax incentives in specific states and cities. It's something, and you see a lot of films being made in states like Ohio. We saw it happening in New Mexico. We saw it happening in Detroit. That's why. And that's certainly encouraged, and that certainly invested back into that local currency and that local talent pool and the workers in those cities and states. But that's it. There's no federal or state outside of that. There's no federal or state funding outside of that. So there are co-production treaties amongst countries like Canada, Australia, UK, Germany, other parts of Asia, other parts of Western Europe. France is another country that invests heavily in its own industry. Same as the UK, Ireland. There's money in Ireland you can tap into. And so what we are seeing some savvier American producers doing is partnering with producers from other countries, or partnering with talent from other countries. And you'd be surprised possibly that when we get lists of actors and directors in terms of who should we look at, who should we select, who should we hire, their nationalities next to it. And it's not because any of us are racist. It's because we want to know what country there might be financial help from. So if you're going to make a film in Canada, you need a Canadian director, you got to have a Canadian writer, and you have to have second highest paid as a Canadian actor, and you need a Canadian producer. So it's not uncommon if the original producer was American, they would partner with the Canadian producer who then helps them put the rest of the Canadian package together. And there might be also a UK producer that might be a Canadian-UK co-production where there is an official treaty between those two countries. And an example would be you shoot the film in Vancouver, but you do post-production in London. And you can tap into soft money opportunities in both of those countries because you're doing work in both of those countries. Now, there's always the caveat of the parameters, what those countries are going to require you to have to be able to tap into that investment. Usually, it's a local filmmaker, always a producer, certainly, and then what you have to do in that space. The idea behind the soft money investments is to bring investment back into their local economy, and second is to promote their own local artistic talent and mind. The first project that Film Mode has been a part of from the beginning, both the production and the financing side, is called Viking Destiny. Now the title says it all pretty much. We feel it's a good title for marketing purposes, but the story has a bit of a twist. It's about a Viking queen, princess, who will become queen, rather than a male lead. So we feel this is very timely with the hype of Wonder Woman and wanting to be much more equal in the stories that we're telling gender-wise. And it's a perfect example of what I was talking about with subsidies. This is a UK production. They shot in Northern Ireland, so they had investment from Northern Ireland Screen. They got UK tax credit. It's a UK producer, UK writer and director, UK talent, but I'm an American executive producer. And we're an American company doing the worldwide sales for it. We were involved very early. We read the script, we gave script notes, we helped the filmmaker find a producer, we helped put together a finance plan, which did include pre-sales. Now, even though this was a lower budgeted film, this is under $6 million, we felt that with the script, a fantastic original proof of concept teaser that the director made, and it looked like the film. It had CG in it. It felt like a trailer. It was really, really well made. And we casted Terrence Stamp as an elder statesman. So with those elements, we had enough to go to the marketplace. and do some pre-sales, which is unusual for a film of this budget. But it really was that proof of concept teaser that he did, the director did. It looked so good that the distributors thought, you know what, we're not going to overpay it, but I made sure no one underpaid. But we got solid numbers, solid commitments from good distributors. We didn't sell the whole world, but we sold enough to help finance the film. And then we helped bring in a lender. It's not an actual bank, but it's an independent financing entity out of London, to then cash flow those pre-sale deals, cash flow the UK tax credit, and some other areas to help put the financing together. When I think about the classic mistakes that new filmmakers make, unfortunately, there's not one. There is, unfortunately, a number of default mistakes that new filmmakers tend to make consistently. And I think part of it is the same personality trait that you need to be a filmmaker, to get a film made, which again, we've talked about how difficult it is. That resistance to know, that resistance to not listen to negativity, sometimes can stand in the way of result or success. So that resistance to listen to good advice. So if I had to come up with one problem or one mistake that new filmmakers make, it's listening to the wrong advice. We are consistently finding that they listen to the people that tell them what they want to hear only. And those are usually people within their vortex. Family, friends, girlfriend, wife, parents, DP, editor, sound mixer, camera rental guy, lab, post, people that's in their vortex. Because they don't have access to distributors, marketing, sales, exhibitors, movie theaters, TV networks, who would be the true voice of reason. So when they hear me tell them the reality, which is a representation of what all those other people I just mentioned are going to think and say, it's me against 50 other people that have been agreeing with them. That can be everything from telling them to change an element of the script, to a cast idea, to where to shoot the film, to a title. And you ask a question to a filmmaker, what's your goal? What's your number one goal? Here are the options. Do you want to meet girls or boys? Do you want dates? Do you want to walk down the red carpet at film festivals and have everyone tell you you're wonderful? Do you want a career? Do you want to make money? Do you want to make money back for this film? What is your goal? I would think it would be to have a career. I want to be a career filmmaker. If I reach amazing success in the Academy Award, fantastic. But my goal is to be a career filmmaker. I think, again, because of the perception of our industry and everything we see on TV and reading the trades, we only read the successes in the trades because the failures are not front page news, right? We don't read the list on the back of all the films that didn't make it. We only read the film on the front that sold for $17 million that was made for $2. That gives hope. And filmmakers are dreamers, and I love that and I encourage that. Because filmmakers are dreamers, that's what they're focusing on, is that dream. And that dream usually is winning the Oscar, walking the red carpet and have everyone tell you how wonderful you are. And so another mistake we make is that filmmakers will put their film in every festival that invites it. And it's that need for immediate response, that immediate accolade, because filmmaking is a delayed art form. We know that. Unlike a play where you have immediate response from the audience, film is very delayed. And especially for an independent filmmaker, they may be working on this for years, and they are just so hungry for someone to clap for their film and tell them how great they are that they jump to that screening, or they jump to accepting an invitation to a little festival in the middle of nowhere that no one knows about, not realizing they have just cannibalized their opportunity at a Sundance or Tribeca or Berlin or Toronto, because they didn't know that the rules of those A-list festivals is a premiere. Probably the second biggest mistake that a new filmmaker may make is how to select what story to do. first or second film, before they're established, how to select what to do, what story to write, or which script to choose. That they're only selecting it from an emotional place. But the audience and the distributors and the marketplace uses very little emotion to select. Again, fortunately or unfortunately, if you want to be a filmmaker and a career filmmaker, I have told newer filmmakers as advice to say you have to earn your capability to do that story that's so special to you. You haven't earned it yet. Because if you go do the drama your first time out with your friends acting in it, no one's going to see this movie. And you probably won't get representation because the agents aren't going to be interested. And you're probably not going to get any distribution because the distribution is impossible for that. But if you do something more on that commercial spectrum we talked about, and you earn your place within the industry 1 or 2 times out, all of a sudden you're making relationships with producers, financiers, agents, talent. So when you want to do that drama, you have an A-list actor who's going to do it with you. And that A-list actor almost acts as an ambassador to the audience, to the marketplace, to enable you to do it.